Russia is proposing to help the Iranians on their missile program, and also at least considering the possibility of providing fighter aircraft to Iran as well. So it's, quite disturbing set of developments.
Have Iran's leaders made the decision to pursue a nuclear weapon?
To the best of our knowledge, we don't believe that the supreme leader in Iran has yet made a decision to resume the weaponization of program that we judged that they suspended or stopped at the end of 2003. But the other two legs of the stool, meaning enrichment programs, have obviously advanced very far over the course of the last couple of years.
Reportedly.
They've advanced very far to the point where it would only be a matter of weeks before they could enrich to 90% if they chose to cross that line. And also in terms of their missile systems, their ability to deliver a nuclear weapon once they developed it has also been advancing as well. So the answer to your question is no, we don't see evidence that they made a decision to resume that weaponization program, but the other dimensions of this challenge, I think, are growing at a worrisome pace too.
Our full conversation with Director Burns is on our website and our YouTube channel. Face the Nation will be back in 1 minute with former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. So don't go away.
This is Face the Nation on Bloomberg Radio.
We're back with President George W. Bush's Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, who is the current director of the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you here.
It's awfully good to be with you, too.
When you were Secretary of State, Bill Burns, CIA Director, was U.S. Ambassador to Moscow.
That's correct, and later on, Undersecretary for Policy at the State Department when I was still at State.
So you worked together very closely, and I was reading his book recently where he's talking about your head-to-head with Vladimir Putin, who didn't like you standing in high heels, apparently taller than he is. But on the serious matter, what do you make of the Biden administration's policy, the choices it's making, and how they're using the CIA director as kind of the tip of the spear here?
Well, I think in general, in total, the policy's in the right direction. You have to support Ukraine. You have to do it as much as you can as a part of a coalition. It's really important that the Europeans are on board, and I've been impressed with what they've been able to achieve with the Europeans in creating that unity. And in a sense, NATO's never been in better shape. I do think, and look, it's a lot easier out here than it is in there, but I do think we sometimes seem to be a little bit behind in what we provide to the Ukrainians. So we were not going to provide air defenses, and then we did. Tanks and armor, and now we have. And so if I could say one thing, perhaps just to anticipate a little bit better what the Ukrainians are going to need, because it takes a long time to supply. And as to Bill Burns' role, he's unique. I think he's walking a very fine line and doing a good job of it. He's an intelligence chief at this point. But he has vast experience in Russia. He knows the Russians. They know him. And so I think the signaling and the sending him to Moscow to talk with Narishkin, for instance, or with Zelensky in Ukraine makes perfectly good sense for this particular director of the CIA.
When you talk about delivering weapons to Ukraine, you wrote an op-ed with former Defense Secretary Bob Gates talking about this, saying have a dramatic increase in military supplies and capability. Does that mean train them yesterday on the F-16s they'll need tomorrow? Is that specifically the piece of weaponry you're focused on?
Well, we weren't talking about a specific set of weapon systems, but I think the idea that you anticipate and therefore perhaps you start the training before it's going to be necessary to send that equipment. The one thing we know is that this war keeps evolving, and you have to try to evolve a little bit ahead of it.
Do you think President Biden's being a little too hesitant?
Well, I don't know internally. We have issues with stockpiles. We have issues with our own defense capabilities, because I don't think anybody expected to be fighting a land war in Europe.
Okay.
And so I have some sympathy for that. But to the degree that that can be accelerated, I think it will help, because I think we have to get away from the phrase time is on the Ukrainian side. I would be careful about that. Vladimir Putin seems to believe the time is not on the Ukrainian side. He believes if he throws in the Russian way of war, mass at the problem, poor boys from Dagestan Russian who are just kind of cannon fodder. If he engages in terrorist activities against the Ukrainian population, he'll wear the Ukrainians down, he'll wear us down, he'll wear the Europeans down. I don't think that's right, but we have to do everything that we can to convince him that it is indeed wrong.
Russia invaded Georgia in 2008.
Yes.
At that time, and I was reading these cables recently, you and Bill Burns were going back and forth on Ukraine joining NATO and whether that crosses that red line for Vladimir Putin. Do you think now, after all these years of waiting, that Ukraine should be allowed into NATO?
Well, that's going to be a hard lift because of the Article 5, an attack upon one is an attack upon all guarantee of NATO.
And I want to take that vote now.
That's right. But I do think that what we've seen is that Ukraine is de facto now a very strong ally of NATO and vice versa. And I expect that's going to continue because I think some form of security arrangements with Ukraine will be necessary in the future, and it's probably good to start working on that now. What we do know is that that NATO itself is protected.
Mm-hmm.
The piece of territory that was not protected was Ukraine, and that tells you something about leaving a vacuum in the center of Europe. And so whatever we do, and I doubt it will be Article 5, we need to make sure that that vacuum isn't there in the future.
At this early stage of the 2024 presidential race, foreign policy is already getting talked about a fair amount. Former President Trump criticized the amount of U.S. funding for Ukraine. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, widely expected to run, said the U.S. cannot provide Ukraine an open-ended blank check. They reject your point of view in many ways by saying the U.S. needs to kind of pull back here.
Well, I'm not going to put words in the mouth of future presidential candidates. We'll see where they end up. But I will.
Ron DeSantis.
But I will say this: it is really important that whoever runs for president of the United States understands the essence of this conflict. The fact that we are defending not just Ukrainian independence, but we are defending a rules-based system that says might doesn't make right. You can't just extinguish your neighbor. And oh, by the way, for those who would say, oh, we ought to be concentrating on the Indo-Pacific because China is really our adversary, Xi Jinping is telling you what he thinks about that because he is not only watching what is going on in Ukraine, according to our intelligence, apparently, he's even considering getting in on the side of the Russians.
Why do you think he would make that judgment? Why is it in his interest?
I think we have to recognize that the Chinese-Russian relationship is perhaps more strategic than many of us had thought, that it really is a relationship that is aimed at the heart of U.S. power in the world. And that would say then these two are not divisible. So if you want to say, let's just concentrate on the Indo-Pacific, that's not going to work. And oh, by the way, many of our allies, Australia, Japan, fundamentally understand that. So I would say to those who are going to run for office, be careful what you say. And I would just make one other point. If the American people see a world in which Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have won this engagement, this first volley, if you will, in the largest strategic picture, and they see that Ukrainian independence has been extinguished, and they know that the United States could have done something about it, I don't think that's going to be a very good message for a future president to have to deliver.
Because that problem will come to his desk.
Because that problem will come to his desk.
Or her desk.
Or her desk. And I just say, just remember dates, 1914, 1941, 2001. These conflicts always come home.
Sobering warning there. You've said, though, for the Republican Party, they need new leadership, a new generation. Do you have a leader in mind? UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, for example?
I think the Republican Party has a lot of very good prospects. When I say we need leadership, new leadership, I'm not coming back either. So I think it's really time for us to look at those who can look at an American future. And there are a lot of very, very good candidates out there. Let's let everybody make their case and see where we end up.
To that question I asked you earlier about why it would be in Xi Jinping's interest to have destabilization in Europe, do you think it really is ultimately a long game for Taiwan, tie up the West in Europe so he can expand in the Pacific?
Well, that's pretty precise. I think this is really more about weakening American power in the world, and one way that you do that I don't think he would have chosen for Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine.
His intelligence didn't know it.
It's become quite a mess as well. And your relationship without limits is with somebody who's causing all kinds of problems. But I think what we have to convince the Chinese of is this is, first of all, not in their interest, because his primary interest is to grow the Chinese economy against headwinds that include, of course, a demographic disaster that they are having, and strengthen Taiwan so that it's not an easy target. It is not inevitable that the Chinese win this battle. In fact, I will bet on American democracy, American innovation, American strength, but that isn't inevitable either, that they will triumph.
Secretary Rice, thank you for your analysis today. We'll be right back.
Now, your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 1130.
It'll remain mostly sunny today and breezy, highs near 50. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, low 30 to 35. Tomorrow, becoming cloudy, snow developing by evening, lows near 40. Tomorrow night, the snow mixing with rain, changing to rain in the city, low near 35. Tuesday, morning rain turning partly sunny for the afternoon, highs near 45. And Wednesday, lots of sun, highs 45 to 50. And that's your Bloomberg 3-day weather forecast. I'm Denise Pellegrini. This is Bloomberg. Now let's check out in Bloomberg Sports.
Spring training, the Yankee split squad plays the Braves and Blue Jays. The Mets face the Nationals. NBA, the Knicks are off. The Nets are in Atlanta. Turning to golf, they're playing the final round at the Honda Classic. Chris Kirk started the round with a 2-shot lead. Serena Williams and Brittany Griner are honored at the NAACP Image Awards in Pasadena. Williams receives the Jackie Robinson Sports Award. Griner was in prison in Russia for 10 months after a small amount of cannabis oil was found in vape cartridges she brought into the country. That's a Bloomberg Sports Update. I'm Joel Stern.
You're listening to Face the Nation on Bloomberg Radio.
A new bipartisan House Select Committee is putting a focus on the geopolitical threat from the Chinese Communist Party. Republican Mike Gallagher serves as the chairman, and Democrat Raja Krishnamurthy is the ranking member. We will talk with them both when we come back. If you can't watch the full Face the Nation, you can set your DVR, or we're available on demand. Plus, you can watch us through our CBS or Paramount Plus app, and we're replayed on our CBS News streaming network throughout the day on Sundays at 1:30 p.m., 4 p.m., and 10 p.m. We'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation. Stay with us.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved ones.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council. The Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council present the story of Tom and Levi.
Tom is the smartest man I know. He's been a professor at 2 major universities, been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, he told me that he was having problems in his classes. I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. And he was telling them that he was doing it as a favor to them, but I think in reality he just wanted to get out of there. I was really starting to worry because I saw something was wrong.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me, and my love for him was just immense.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
If you can plan barbecues and weddings, you can plan to protect yourself from a natural disaster. Sign up for local alerts, prepare an emergency kit, and make a family communications plan. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Wherever your business takes you, Bloomberg Radio is here with you.
breaking economic news crossing the Bloomberg.
Powered by 2,700 journalists and analysts.
So let's get to some of the day's gainers.
In more than 120 countries around the world.
We are seeing a flatter picture for European stocks this morning.
We're the only 24/7 global business radio platform.
This market regime is going to come with more volatility.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
In the 1980s and 90s, John McAfee was a Silicon Valley icon. But after he sold his company and basked in his riches, things took a dark turn.
I will not allow them to imprison me and shut my voice down.
This season on Foundering, we'll retrace the life of John McAfee. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Face the Nation on Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. We're joined now by the two leaders of that new House Select Committee on China, Congressman Mike Gallagher and Raja Krishnamurthy. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
You have your first hearing on Tuesday. What is the message you both hope to send with it?